King's Landing had fallen. The army of the dead broke through the walls after Rhaegal was killed by the undead dragon Viserion. Hidden wildfire beneath the city exploded, destroying entire districts and killing Queen Cersei Lannister. Jon, Daenerys, Tyrion, Sansa, Davos, and the last survivors of humanity escaped by ship, sailing east across the narrow sea. Behind them, the Night King stood victorious over the ruins of Westeros. Now the story continues. The narrow sea had never felt so vast. For weeks, the surviving ships sailed slowly eastward through cold, gray waters. Behind them, Westeros disappeared beneath a thick wall of snow and darkness. Almost nobody spoke during the whole journey. The survivors spent their days staring westward toward the horizon, unable to fully accept what had happened to them. Their home was gone. The Seven Kingdoms had fallen completely. The Iron Throne had been destroyed forever. Humanity had lost the war. Jon Snow stood alone at the front of his ship every single morning. Sleep rarely came to him anymore, no matter how tired he felt. Whenever he closed his eyes, he saw Winterfell burning again. He saw Bran dying beneath the Heart Tree. He saw Rhaegal falling from the sky. Most of all, he saw the faces of all the people he had failed to save. The heavy weight of their deaths followed him everywhere he went. He had spent his entire life trying to protect the realm. Yet in the end, the realm had fallen anyway, no matter what he did. Daenerys struggled with her own deep grief. Rhaegal's death had left a wound inside her that refused to heal. Drogon stayed by her side constantly, almost as if he could sense her pain. The great dragon rarely left the skies above the fleet now. Even he seemed different somehow. More cautious. More watchful than before. The loss of his brother had clearly changed him. Weeks later, the survivors finally reached the free cities of Essos. Their arrival shocked the local rulers there. Stories about the fall of Westeros had already spread across the known world, but very few people had actually believed them. Now, thousands of exhausted refugees stood as living proof that the impossible had truly happened. The dead had conquered an entire continent. The city of Braavos became humanity's final refuge. Massive camps were built outside its tall walls. Refugees from Westeros mixed together with soldiers, merchants, nobles, and common folk. Entire noble houses that had once ruled whole kingdoms now lived side by side with ordinary farmers. Titles no longer mattered to anyone. Everyone had become equal in defeat. Months passed slowly by. Then years passed. The whole world changed. Winter never ended. Across Essos, temperatures kept falling lower and lower. Snow began appearing in regions that had never known cold weather before. Crops failed everywhere. Rivers froze solid. Trade routes collapsed completely. Even from across the sea, the Night King's dark influence kept spreading further and further. Travelers who managed to escape from Westeros brought back horrifying stories. The continent had become a frozen wasteland. King's Landing lay buried beneath thick ice. The Reach had become nothing but a graveyard. The Riverlands were completely silent. The North no longer existed as a kingdom at all. Every city was gone. Every castle was gone. Every village was gone. All of it now belonged to the dead. The Night King ruled from the ruins of the Red Keep, which had been transformed into a fortress made of ice and darkness. Viserion patrolled the skies above the continent while the White Walkers governed the frozen lands down below. No living kingdom remained anywhere in all of Westeros. The survivors called it by only one name: the World of Ice. 5 long years after the fall of King's Landing, hope had nearly vanished completely. Children were growing up having never once seen their homeland. Many people believed that humanity's defeat was permanent and final. Some argued that they should simply accept their fate and live out the rest of their lives peacefully in Essos. Jon refused to accept this. Every single day he trained new soldiers. Every single day he searched for answers. Every single day he prepared for a war that most people believed could never actually be won. One evening, Tyrion joined him high atop the walls overlooking Braavos. Down below them, thousands of refugees lived crowded together in makeshift camps. "They've stopped believing," Tyrion said quietly. Jon nodded slowly. "Then we'll believe enough for all of them," he replied. For the first time in years, Tyrion actually smiled. Meanwhile, Arya Stark had spent those same years traveling across Essos. Unlike the others, she refused to sit still and remain idle. She searched through ancient libraries, forgotten temples, and hidden ruins scattered across the land. She followed rumors that were older than recorded history itself. Somewhere out there, she believed deeply, there had to be an answer to all of this. Then one day she finally found it. Deep beneath the ruins of an ancient city, one older than Valyria itself, Arya uncovered forgotten writings carved directly into black stone. The language was ancient and nearly impossible for anyone to translate. Yet one single symbol appeared again and again throughout the writings. A weirwood tree. At its very center stood a figure surrounded by both fire and ice at the same time. Arya immediately rushed back to Braavos with her discovery. When she presented what she had found to Jon, Daenerys, Tyrion, and Samwell Tarly, an entirely new possibility emerged for the very first time. Sam spent many months carefully translating the ancient text. What he eventually discovered changed absolutely everything. The White Walkers had not simply been created as weapons of war. They had actually been created to keep balance in the world. Thousands of years ago, when the children of the forest used forbidden magic to create the very first White Walker, they had unknowingly tied him to the very forces that shaped the entire world itself. Life and death. Fire and ice. Light and darkness. The Night King had become something far more than just a king. He had become part of the world's very foundation. Destroying him completely would require much more than simple dragonglass or Valyrian steel weapons. It would require going back to the exact place where everything had first begun. The Isle of Faces. This was a sacred island hidden within the God's Eye Lake. It was the very place where the first men and the children of the forest had forged their ancient pact together, thousands of years earlier. According to the ancient writings, a forgotten source of powerful magic still remained there. A power older than dragons. Older than the wall itself. Older than the White Walkers themselves. For the first time since Winterfell had fallen, genuine hope finally returned to the group. Yet there was another revelation waiting. One that was far more troubling than the last. The ancient texts also gave a warning. They said the Night King would eventually learn about this powerful source himself, sooner or later. And once he did learn about it, he would no longer be content just ruling over Westeros alone. He would cross the narrow sea. He would come for Essos next. He would come for the entire world after that. As if fate itself wished to confirm this frightening warning, another ship arrived in Braavos just a few days later. Its crew consisted of only 3 survivors in total. All 3 were nearly frozen completely to death. Their terrifying story sent shockwaves rippling through the whole city. The Night King was building ships of his own. Entire fleets of them. The dead were now preparing to cross the sea themselves. Panic spread rapidly through Braavos. Humanity's final refuge was quickly running out of time. That night, Jon stood quietly overlooking the harbor below. Thousands of small lights flickered across the city beneath him. Behind him stood Daenerys, Tyrion, Arya, Sam, Davos, Sansa, and the remaining leaders of humanity, all gathered together. For years they had run away. For years they had simply survived day by day. But survival alone was no longer enough for any of them. The war had to end once and for all. Jon looked west toward the darkness spreading beyond the sea, toward the frozen continent that had once been his home. "The Night King is coming," he said quietly. "No," Daenerys replied, her eyes fixed steadily on the horizon. "We're going to him." Silence followed her words. Then one by one the others nodded in agreement. The decision had finally been made. Humanity would return to Westeros. Not as refugees this time. Not as survivors this time. But as conquerors. And somewhere across the frozen ruins of the 7 kingdoms, the Night King slowly opened his glowing blue eyes and stared off toward the east. As if he already knew what was coming. The final battle was approaching at last.